Welcome back to Filthy Casuals channel. I know it's been a hot minute since I've put something else out, but we are back. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the All-NBA teams. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the CBA. I'm going to be talking a little bit about playoffs. I'm just going to be all over the place, and once this video gets to be too long, I'm just going to end it, and we'll put out another video. So leave a like, comment, subscribe. I just went rock climbing, very fun. I'm super pumped. And let's get into it. All right, so the first thing that I really wanted to talk about was the MVP discussion because I figured that's a very easy place to start. And I think that nobody who's watched this channel has heard. I mean, everybody's heard that I believe Embiid's the MVP, but I do want to comment on not this year's MVP race, but last year's MVP race, because this is really, I think, the reason why Jokic is losing in a lot of people's minds. I think it is very much MVP fatigue. I think it's fatigue from winning 2 MVPs, not really having anything to show for it. And it's not that he hasn't played well in the playoffs. Like, it's more so the fact that last year he won MVP in a season where he was a 6 seed winning 48 games. He led the league in PER. He had insane true shooting numbers. He had pretty much everything across the board. I will also comment, though, his three-point percentage was pretty down. So I was looking at some similar seasons, or what I believed was similar, and the first thing that popped up to my mind was like, well, who else in the league in recent history was a low playoff seed but led the league in PER? And the first thing that popped into my head was 2017-18 Anthony Davis. So I go and I looked at AD's stats, and I looked at Jokic's stats from last year. Jokic averaged 27, 8 assists, 14 rebounds on 58% shooting, 34% from three, and what's his turnovers? And about 4 turnovers a game. AD, and also he averaged less than a block, 0.9. So say a block and a steal. AD averaged 28 points. He averaged, where's his rebound? 28 points, 11 rebounds, 2.3 assists, led the league in blocks with 2.6, 1.5 steals a game, 2 turnovers a game on shooting splits of 34% from 3 and 53% from the field. They both led the league in PER and set PER records. So, and they were both on 48-win teams that ended up placing 6th in their conference that year. Now, to me, these 2 seasons are highly, highly comparable. Yes, I understand Jokic had a lot more assist numbers. Anthony Davis was arguably the best defensive player in the league that year. I believe that was Kawhi's season where he won DPOY. And I think Draymond was second in DPOY voting that year. That might have been the year before, but semantics. He was one of the 3 to 4 best defensive players in the league that year. So assists, defense, I'd say it somewhat cancels each other out. So Anthony Davis was 3rd in MVP voting that year. He was 3rd. He was behind Westbrook and Harden. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why the conversation around the 2 seasons were so different. Because in one season, AD was a distant 3rd, and in the other one, Jokic was a runaway for it. And I genuinely can't understand. And the one thing that I can think of is the difference in games played, which is going to lead me into the CBA discussion. But the games played difference of Joel Embiid to the games played of the competition of Harden and Westbrook was massive. But the difference in games played in the season that Jokic played last year between Jokic and Embiid was really not that massive. It was like 15 games, which is a lot. Right? Let me double check that. I don't even think it was that. I think he won. I think he played 65 games that season. Let me double check this just to make sure. 68 games. 68 games to 74 games. So it's a 6-game difference. It's a 6-game difference, which now that we know with this incoming CBA for awards, a minimum of 65 games played to be required to win an award. Is that 6-game difference really substantial enough to give Jokic the MVP? I really don't think so. And I understand that they both won similar amounts of games. But again, you're playing in different conferences. There is some level of translatability, but it's not completely translatable, right? Like the Nuggets just won 50 games this season, and I don't think that they're as strong as the 50 win teams out in the East. I think maybe the Cavs, they're probably better than, but the other 50 win teams I'd take over the Nuggets pretty solidly this season. So for me at least, I think that was a mistake, and I think Jokic is paying for it now, and I think it'll come out in the wash. I think Embiid's going to win this year, and I think Embiid is going to have an MVP, and I think Jokic is going to have an MVP, which realistically, that's probably what should have happened. You know, maybe 2, maybe 1, whichever way it ended up working out. But I digress. That was 6.5 minutes. I did not mean for it to be that long. Moving on. New CBA. So, main things. In-season tournament, 65 games minimum, which I already just talked about. I think that's... The 65-game minimum, I think, is a good thing because it already kind of existed. But in a season like this where, like, everybody missed games, there are lots of people who played, like, low to mid 50 games that are in consideration for All-NBA because they're the best players in the league. And it's like, all right, are we going to have, I don't know, Tyrese Halliburton because he's played more games? Not to say that he's a bad player, but are we going to put Tyrese Halliburton in or De'Aaron Fox in over Steph Curry because Steph Curry didn't hit 65 games? And it seems... And I understand that they said that they had... And Draymond said it best. Everybody's good for it until they got to put bums on their All-NBA teams. But I do think the positionless thing is kind of meant to counteract that, where it's like, okay, well, you're not forced to go down the forward depth chart and end up having to put, I don't know, Dorian Finney-Smith as an All-NBA player because every better wing in the league got injured, right? Like all 80 of them. Like, you know, it's, you know, that's, I think its purpose. The positionless thing, I think, is fine. I think if you were putting the NBA back in time, I think all NBA teams should be the 15 best players in the league. If you were thinking about it from like a grand scale, like what are these who should win these awards? The 15 best players in the league, right? Who should qualify for these supermax contracts? The 15 best players in the league. And if they're 15 forwards or 15 guards or 15 centers, it's just the way it is. I think as the game evolves, it's going to favor taller players. But I don't think that will only be the case. I think guards have, through this revolution, really showed that, hey, this quickness, hey, this versatility of guards is valuable, especially in the playoffs, just as much as a good wing, just as much as a good center. I think the guard position so far this season, I think if we were to do All-NBA this season positionless, it'd be just like a ton of guards and like a couple of wings. Like, I think the third team would literally only be guards and then like Sabonis or Jaren Jackson Jr. or, you know, or Anthony Davis, whoever you've got in that third team, right? And hey, maybe one of those players ends up being a second team, right? Like maybe Sabonis would be All-NBA second team because you have Jokic and Embiid on first team. So I think it's interesting, and I think it's just going to be a little point to mark. I don't think people ever really cared that much when looking back. It's like, oh, he got 20 All-NBA first teams versus, oh, he's got 20 All-NBA teams, but only 10 of them were first team, 5 of them were second team, 5 of them were third team. I think people tend to be just acknowledge the fact that, hey, some seasons other guys just got the award because the media was like, oh my God, would you look at this player? That's so amazing. And it's always kind of been like that. Um, Moving on from that, I do want to briefly touch on the in-season tournament. The in-season tournament is something that I've kind of been thinking about. So it doesn't replace any regular season games. It adds one extra game to the season for the two finalists of the tournament, and pretty much the only reward is some bonus money. I don't know how I feel about that. I understand why it works, but I feel like it's going to be somewhat like the All-Star Elam ending, where it was really good the first year because it was new and it was meaningful to the players because it was Kobe, right? It was Kobe Bryant. It was his ending. That's how they were going to play the game. But I do also want to say that I think this is not going to work. And it's not that I'm not a fan of the idea of an in-season tournament, just the way that it's set up. The players aren't going to give a shit. Yes, some of the lower level players are going to be very happy to have that money, but are the star players really going to give that much of a shit? Is it going to put an unnecessary target on your back? Not that anybody really cares about that, but it seems to be lacking some sort of substantive thing. And I think that is a product of them wanting to push through so that there's not a lockout and they just wanting to implement it as opposed to actually implementing something that has some kind of value. Because the whole reason the play-in works is because it, and I will say I am a fan of the play-in. I wasn't a fan of it the first season because it was just new, and I was like, when a 7 or 8 seed misses the playoffs, which they inevitably will because it's going to happen, it's kind of like every season before this team would have made the playoffs. And it felt kind of like, fuck. This season, and pretty much every season since then, it's like, okay, this is what to expect. This is what we are expecting. Everybody knows this. Everybody's prepared for that, and they're going to fight like hell to end up in a top 6 seed. And if you don't feel like you're a top 6 seed, you're going to tank like hell, or you're going to like scratch and claw your way into that play-in to be like, hey, we made the postseason, sort of. And you can kind of say that your season wasn't a complete and total failure, even though you're the Bulls and now you're in the play-in instead of a top 6 seed because Lonzo Ball's been injured and Zach LaVine played like shit for half the year. So overall, I think that this idea is half-baked at the moment. I think the idea itself is strong, but the implementation is going to result in people wanting more. Whether or not it ends up being really good in its first year, I think it'll take a couple of seasons for us to really see where it's going. And that does not preclude this mid-season tournament from having alternate wildcard implications. Maybe winning the tournament could guarantee you a spot in the play-in, right? Like if you fall out of the play-in, you could pick a team to play for your life. Like, I don't know. That's kind of a goofy idea that I literally just came up with on the spot, but have something, some postseason implication. Maybe you win your division automatically if you win the tournament, right? If you're the winner of the tournament or one of the two finalists, you're automatically have home court advantage against your division in the playoffs, right? Maybe, I don't know. That might be too much. It just feels like there should be some kind of implication. Other than that, I do want to say my All-NBA teams have changed slightly since I posted my video. I don't think I should put Luka on the first team. The fact that the Mavericks just completely missed the playoffs, it feels like a lot. But I also don't really feel like I should be putting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on first team because his team won 2 more games. That doesn't really feel fair to me. So, especially when his team tanked intentionally to not even give him a shot at it. So, for me, I'm going to be putting Dame and Curry as my first teamers. I'm going to be putting Luka on the third team. I'm going to be putting Shai and Dame on the second team, and I'm going to be putting Ja Morant on the third team. There's a lot of other guards that could go there. Jalen Brunson actually putting as a forward on my All-NBA teams. I changed my mind. I'm putting him as a forward. And Jimmy Butler's off the team. But the whole idea of these all NBA teams this year is really tough, especially given that the whole criteria is changing next year. And yeah. And actually no, it's not Jimmy Butler that's going off. It's KD, because KD's only played like 48 games. He hasn't even played 50 games. I can't put him on the all NBA team with like less than 50 games. It's just not happening. So that's what it is for me. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Tell me what you want me to talk about. I'm probably going to start be doing initial like matchup breakdowns. I've already done one for the Knicks and Cavs, which is by far the most interesting matchup. So I'm probably going to be doing the what's it called? The Kings Warriors, which I think is also an interesting matchup, and I'm probably going to be doing the Suns Clippers, which could be a blowout, but it could also be more interesting than I think a lot of people are giving it credit for. So thank you and have a wonderful evening.